Bob Baer, Harry Houck's talking about the one dead shooter who they, at this point, would obviously have a lot of information about him, his fingerprints, possibly his name, others who may know him. At this point, would that lead them to a much more definitive assessment of this crucial question of whether this was domestic or internationally driven terrorism?
Oh, absolutely, Aaron. They'll get indicia from the fingerprints. They'll get it from the car, a cell phone, whatever they find. There will be some digital connection to the rest of the world, I would imagine, and it will tell us very quickly, probably later tonight, whether this is terrorism or it's something else. But again, I go back. I've just never seen multiple shooters with automatic weapons who fled the scene, and with this sort of skill. And it was a certain amount of skill that you just don't ever see this unless people have had some sort of true preparation or training.
Harry, everyone, you can see on this part of your screen, that is where the press conference is going to happen any moment, and we do anticipate maybe getting some very significant answers there, so we're going to keep that up as we're waiting police officers to speak. Harry, when you hear Bob talking about, though, the unprecedented nature and the concern he feels when he three shooters, we've only had 2 multiple shooter incidents since the year 2000, and none of them have been anything like this. But if it is not an international incident, then what could it be?
It could be some right-wing group, for all I know. You know, what's really strange about this attack to me is I'm thinking, if this this attack was somehow terrorist-related, ISIS or, you know, Al-Qaeda, something like that, why wouldn't they just stay there and kill as many people as possible? And just, you know, kill themselves, because usually you see that a lot also in these types of attacks.
Right, it was not a suicide mission, Bob, to Harry's point.
Right, it wasn't. Listen, I'm not discounting anything Bob's saying, because I'm speculating like the rest of us here. You know, so that's something else I'm taking a look at here. And their plan, like I said before, was great until they got out of the area where they did the shooting, and then these guys still stuck around. This shows me some level of stupidity on their part.
And I want to just, on the bottom of your screen, Bob, before you speak, I want to make sure everyone hears this. The police chief has just tweeted, suspects are down, 1 officer wounded. We knew that there was an officer wounded. That officer does not have life-threatening injuries. But in terms of suspects are down, a few minutes ago at the top of the hour, when police officers spoke live press conference on the show, they said 1 suspect was down. And they were dealing with another, but they're now saying suspects are down, plural. So, as I said, in the next few minutes, we're going to be hearing more from police, understand exactly what that means. Bob Baer, when you put this together, you hear what Harry's saying. I mean, the one thing that does stand out here is that at least they thought they were going to get away. Very different than what we saw in Paris. And does it lead you to think that this is more likely to be domestic terrorism?
Well, I always cite it's domestic terrorism of some sort. It's the best explanation. But the fact is, a couple of the parachuters did shoot into cafes. Abba Oud, the leader of this, was planning on carrying out attacks the next day. So, I mean, they don't have a precise manual. Some of these people blow themselves up. Some of them do multiple attacks. Some of them get away. And in fact, one of the parachuters may be in Syria right now. He certainly got away. So, I mean, they don't have a fixed manual on this. And again, we're going to have to wait until the facts come out.
Bobby Chacon, when you hear suspects are down from the police chief, again, we're going to hear from him in a few moments, but does that change the situation to you? Because there still had been a question as to whether there were 2 or 3 possible attackers.
Well, and they still may be dealing with that issue. The fact that the chief said suspects are down doesn't negate the fact that there could be additional suspects still being looked for. They might know, they might have a good, strong indication that that's all there are, but there still could be other suspects out there.
Do you think they're still looking for a third if suspects are down, and that means 2? Obviously, it could mean 3, but if it does mean the 2 they were referring to, do you think that they still believe there's a third?
They're going to keep looking. I mean, obviously, we've got a scenario here where the initial reports were 3, up to 3. I'm hearing that there's possibly a third one out there. So, again, we're still in a fluid situation here. Obviously, this press conference is going to be key. But I think one of the important things here to note, Aaron, is that the SWAT teams in these armored vehicles are key to this search. Because if we're talking about these assailants using either ARs, AR-15s, which is a .223 round, or an AK-47, which is a much larger round, a 5.6 round, I would hate to be a regular patrol patrol officer with my regular bulletproof vest and my handgun to go up against that type of firepower, because it'll go right through the vehicle. It will also go right through my vest.
Harry?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt, he's correct. That .223 round, 5.56 round, military-type rounds going to go right through your vehicle, right through your vest, right through the back of your vest, and probably into the back of the vehicle that you're driving. It's a very fast round. You know, they have capabilities of 30-round, 60-round clips for these type of weapons also.
Okay.
So it's a very bad round.
Deb Farrick joins us now with some breaking details. Deb, what do you know more about the SUV and what they found?
Yeah, and this is in talking to a source. There were two men inside that vehicle. At least one of them is dead following the chase. One of the men that was outside the vehicle, both of them, according to the source, had AR-15 type weapons. And as police were chasing the vehicle, items were being thrown from the window, including what appears to be these pipe bombs, and those are being looked at very closely right now. We do know that one of the officers engaged the suspect. One of the suspects shooting, I'm told, from the back window. The officer engaged them. That officer is now being questioned because what they're really trying to determine, Aaron, is just how many people there were altogether in that car. And that's why you can see some of what's taking place. They're going door to door just to make sure no one got out. The search in Redlands, I'm also being told, is the home of one of the possible suspects. So this is over a certain range, and that's one of the reasons, because they were throwing things from the vehicle, because they were firing back, and clearly police are trying to make sure that no one else is out there and on the loose, and that's really what they are engaged in right now, Aaron.
All right, so Deb, obviously you're answering a crucial question because we had a reporter on the ground in Redlands. You're saying that's the home of one of the shooters. You're saying that there were two, though, in the vehicle, which would indicate that unless they split, there may not be a third?
That is unclear. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of chaos. You know, things that I was told, even an hour ago have changed a little bit. So what we are learning, though, is that the home that's being looked at in Redlands is the home of a possible suspect. They're looking at that right now. But again, nobody has said that there are other suspects out there. And in terms of who else they're looking for, that's why they're questioning the police officer, because he was the one who really had eyes on the vehicle, and he's the one who was injured in a ricochet effect. And so they are now questioning him because what he knows could be very, very valuable in terms of knowing how many were in that car and how many might be at large, if in fact there remain any.
And Deb, do they know at this time names, profile, anything about these individuals that could lead down the path to who they knew, who else was involved, and the motive?
All of that is being looked at right now very aggressively. As Harry mentioned earlier, they are likely taking fingerprints from the individual who is known dead. They will be able to link him to certain addresses. There was a name that was floating out there earlier today. Right now, everybody's being very, very careful in terms of reporting any sort of a name, but there doesn't appear to be a motive. And interestingly, and I heard one of the experts speaking earlier on your show, Aaron, who said, they seem to have a plan to execute this, which, for all intents and purposes, could be like any active shooter drill, but they didn't have a plan to get out, very much like the Kawauchi brothers. So we don't know what their motive was. We don't know what their end goal was. But whether they thought they would be caught so quickly, it appears that right now law enforcement really does have this, to a large extent, under control.
All right, Deb, thank you very much. Obviously, significant reporting there from Deb. The press conference will start at any moment. So, again, we're going to leave that picture up because the minute the police chief approaches that podium, we're going to be taking that, see if we can get even more details. Deb, obviously, though, breaking some significant new information, saying that there were two men in the vehicle with AR-15 type weapons and that they were throwing things out of that SUV before the shootout happened, including pipe bombs. Harry, two men in the vehicle, still, as Deb said, unclear whether there is a third. They don't yet have an answer on that.
Right.
But when you hear what Deb just reported, how does this change the story for you?
Well, you got two dead perps, or, I assume they're both dead. And you got them fingerprinted already. You probably already got them
suspects are
partially,
down. So the presumption is that the suspects, plural, is now the two that were in the vehicle.
Right. So they've both been fingerprinted already. That information went in DNA was also taken, I'm sure. Put in some type of database to try and identify this guy. Whether there's not a third guy or not, the police should already know that by now. I mean, they know that the officer engaged these guys, all right? And there might have been other witnesses that saw the engagement with the officers, and some of the officers that were chasing the vehicle. So the police should know by now. And if there was any videos at the scene where the attack occurred, how many shooters there really were. They got plenty of witnesses that they spoke to, so they should be pretty clear. But it seems like they're very hesitant to actually say whether or not they can confirm a third shooter or not.
Yeah,
and that's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, Colonel Watt, does that concern you at this point, that they're still not able to confirm a third shooter?
No, the assumption that there's a third one out there is a valid assumption. They're going to keep working on that. But let's not also lose sight of the fact that they're also developing leads of people who supported these people in their activities. So there are going to be more sites, there are going to be more searches, there are going to be more efforts to obtain evidence and determine exactly the extent of the planning, the organization. There are people who would have assisted in surveillance, potentially pre-target surveillance, all of those types of things. So this thing's going to continue to grow. It's not going to stop soon.
Art, from Deb's reporting, they're talking about pipe bombs being thrown out of the car as it was driving down the street before the shootout, the AR-15 rifles. Do you think that they were planning more attacks, that this was perhaps a getaway to something else, or what? I mean, they had a lot of weapons they hadn't used.
I mean, to know now that they were throwing pipe bombs out the window, you can only assume that they were very possibly going to a different location. And it makes sense now that they had that EOD vehicle come up to the SUV that was abandoned by the one shooter, and it was blocked in by the other two Bearcats. Now we know why they had thrown pipe bombs out the window. This gets really scary once you start talking about pipe bombs.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't heard yet what was in that suspicious package at the facility that was left behind. Was it
That's
also
right.
a pipe bomb?
Harry, you're talking about, when you hear about all these weapons, though, they didn't go, if there was another location planned, it wasn't nearby.
Right. I mean, why would they wait so long to attack? When you had every single police unit in that area from the first attack, they were basically free to go to another location and attack, and they didn't. All right. Were they waiting for tomorrow? I mean, this is what doesn't make sense to me. Why are they still in the area? The only reason you can think is the reason why they're still in the area is that they wanted to attack another location. For some reason, either they didn't or they weren't smart enough to know that to do the attack right away, and they were going to wait later on till tonight or maybe tomorrow, hopefully that they didn't get caught. Why were they out there driving around on the street? Why? With the weapons and like that, when they knew that we were looking for that type of vehicle? Something just does not make sense to me.
Bobby, does it make any more sense to you?
I agree with Harry, and you know, the thing that bothers me about the domestic terrorism scenario is that normally either the target, the individual target, or the location targeted is symbolic, and we don't seem to have that in this scenario. When McVeigh blew up the Murrah Federal Building, both the date of the attack and obviously the location of the attack was symbolic. We don't seem to have, if this was a domestic terrorism type event, we don't seem to have that same symbolism either by the individuals that were attacked or at the location, unless we can develop a little more. And I'm sure the people at the JRIC, the Joint Regional Intelligence Center, that's manned by all the state, local, and federal authorities, and there's this intelligence fusion cell, are working on those scenarios. But to me, the domestic terrorism, there's just not the symbolism that's normally associated with the targets of the attack.
Bob Baer, when you hear about the pipe bombs being thrown out of the car, what do you think? And I'll note that this, our Pamela Brown is being told that the current belief that law enforcement is working under, I want to use their exact words, is that this is either domestic terrorism or criminal. Whatever, to make that distinction. When you hear these pipe bombs, what does it lead you to believe?
Aaron, I think about Boston. The Tsarnaev brothers threw pipe bombs or improvised devices out of the car in order to break contact with the police. This is a fairly common tactic in the Middle East. When you're being chased, you throw a couple bombs out, they go off, the police stop, they back off, you get away. Now, I can only speculate why they threw them, but clearly that car, by throwing them out the window, they weren't going to, save themselves from arrest or anything. So I would imagine they hope to get the police to back off, to either escape or move to the next target. Again, and I agree on the symbolism, it's just incomprehensible why they would attack this target. unless there was a group of people there we don't know about, because I don't know of any political connotations that health center had. I mean, it's just crazy.
Right. I mean, it was a broader health center, as we've been talking about. Also, it was a conference center there, which we understand there was sort of an end of the year thing for county officials. So there were government officials of some sort there. I mean, Harry, that we do know that.
If this was a militia group, which is of course another guess, all right. Why would they attack a Department of Health? Why would they attack a federal building or something like that, like we saw Timothy McVeigh do? They attacked. Maybe they just knew that there was going to be a large amount of people there, and that's why they chose to attack that location. I mean, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered here, and we're going to learn a lot from this attack, and we always learn a lot from these attacks to be able to try and help prevent the next one.
Colonel Watt, the big question, though, is if there is another shooter on the loose. They've been vague on that, and maybe we're going to get answers at this press conference, which is now a couple of minutes late, but we're awaiting. Maybe we'll get some crucial answers on this, because you've got darkness descending, and with at this point, no one publicly knowing what the motive is here. The people that they did find, the two shooters who were down, had all these extra pipe bombs. What does that say about this possible third shooter and what this person could be capable of doing?
Well, they need to make the assumption there is a third shooter until they verify that there wasn't. The target also disturbs me because it speaks to me of a high body count, a desire for a high body count, reasonably helpless people on a location. That has a signature to it, and like Bob Baer says, the tactics I'm seeing speak to me more of the Middle East than they do of the kinds of things that are criminal in nature.
Why then, I'm asking you to speculate, why then wouldn't they have killed more people than they did? They had a lot of weapons that they didn't use. Why would they have fled instead of killing more people and ending this in a suicide mission?
Well, the amount of time in which they left speaks to me of some knowledge of police response capability, and I think there may very well be the likelihood of a second target. What stopped them, what interdicted that effort to move to a second target is going to be interesting to hear about.
When you talk about police response time, I believe Bob Baer was pointing out, right, it's 7 to 12 minutes. So you're saying that fits with they were trying to get whatever they could do within that time frame and then leave the first scene?
Absolutely.
And they definitely
the amount of time that they've used to create as much damage as possible and then move on speaks to me of planning and coordination.
Right, and apparently they had pipe bombs in the vehicle also. Were they going to be used at another attack, or were they figuring if the police were chasing them, they would use them by throwing them out the window? That's a big question here, and you know, I'm going on a thought that there was probably going to be a second attack, but somehow, for some reason, they didn't do it. And we're going to have to find that out. You know what I mean? Because that's the only reason why they would still be in the area. If they really wanted to get away, they could have been on that one highway there and gone, you know, within 5 minutes. So they stuck around the area, so there had to be another attack planned.
And Art, in terms of what Deb was reporting, that they were throwing pipe bombs out of the windows of the SUV before the shootout, that indicates to you what? That they were trying to have those explode and send police away, or they were just, what would be the reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, very possibly, I agree that could have been the tactic. It just is, there's a lot of strange circumstances going on here. They picked that one building that was the softest target because in the other two buildings you needed a key pass to get in and key passes to get in the different doors. So obviously they had some intel to say that they were letting the public walk in and out of that conference center because of the event that was going on. It's also interesting that you know, them throwing the pipe bombs out of the car, you would assume that was to break contact with police, but you know, again, was this going to be used at another event or another location?
You know, also the fact that you know, they attacked this location because, you know, if they had attacked the building, they would have had to go into different rooms.
Right.
You know,
So this was a compound. There was health offices, there were offices that dealt with people with disabilities, and there was a conference center. It was a very big
So
complex.
you've got a conference center there where they could actually go in, and their targets were just standing right there in front of them. This was a target-rich environment for them. You know, there's nobody behind doors. Everybody's out in the open, and they're having a good time and partying.
I'm sorry, who was that talking?
It's similar to Paris, what happened at the concert theater, where you have a large group of people that you can indiscriminately shoot and get a high body count.
Art, again, though, the question that to try to understand this, and we are going to find out more when this press conference begins, right? Perhaps on motive, who these people were that might answer some of these questions. But there is the question as to why did they not kill more people. If they have AR-15s, they had pipe bombs. They did not choose to do that.
They might have had a specific time to be on the ground to complete whatever mission that they were going to do. And that could have been it. I mean, there was also talk that there was a fire alarm pulled in one of the buildings. And initially we had thought, hey, that's a good tactic to get everybody out of the building because of the active shooter protocols where everybody shelters in place behind a locked door. So if they stayed on the scene, they could have actually shot a lot more people. But I think, you know, just from the information we know now, that they probably had a specific time that they were going to be in there before they made good their escape.
And Bobby, we don't know anything. In these press conferences so far, the police officials have been asked, did they yell anything, right? People, of course, are trying to figure out whether this was, let's just be honest about it, whether there was any sort of Islamic terrorism angle to this. They haven't answered that question. There hasn't been any indication that that is the case at this point. Do you think that that is still possible?
I don't think international terrorism is indicated here, and I also don't. I'm not really sure about the domestic terrorism angle. I would be really surprised if they didn't have some connection to the group that was meeting there. If they were only interested in a high body count, there are other opportunities in and around this area, sporting events, movie theaters, other public gatherings, that would have given them the opportunity for that. This is kind of, it's not a remote location, but it's kind of a specialized location. It'd be kind of, I would tend to think they had some kind of connection either to the location, or the group
event
meeting there.
And I guess the question is then, that how could they have worked together? I mean, that is what's also impressive. This isn't a single shooter. If this were a single shooter, this conversation would be different. This is two, if not three, people who worked together, who coordinated, who pulled something off.